I want to start with the first topic. And it was a video I sent you from Rob Markman. Rob Markman is a hip hop media personality. I guess you say journalist, podcaster. I've seen a lot of his videos. He's known in the hip hop space, and this video caught my eye. It's, do you care if rappers use AI to write lyrics? Um, AI is everywhere now, right? It's just touching every part of every industry at this point.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
if you haven't seen AI, then I'm not sure what you're doing. You're
Well, you're
somehow
not watching this podcast because
right.
you gotta go through a lot of AI just to see anybody with in real life. So
Absolutely, absolutely. But the interesting thing as far as when it comes to music, and there's so many different ways we could go, but this one, like I said, regarding writing, um, involving hip hop, and there was this Chicago rapper that he spoke about named Baby Chief Dolts, which I'll be honest, I haven't heard of this guy. Haven't heard of this guy.
if you
Um,
haven't heard of him, I definitely haven't heard of him.
right. And I guess the question is, do we care? Um, I guess I'll start by saying for myself, um, I'm probably I don't know how old Rob Markman is. I believe we're probably close in age because a lot of what he was saying about the culture of hip hop and how we grew up, as far as if we found a rapper who didn't write their own lyrics, in many ways it was a knock on them, or
Oh
or
yeah.
or in um, and in some ways, like we would use different annotations, like so someone could be a rapper if they don't write because they're just rapping the lyrics, but they're not considered an MC, which is elevated, right? Um,
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah.
yeah,
I got
yeah,
in my throat.
right.
No,
But
we were
but
all
but
there when that happened.
yeah, but it's like a generational thing, right? So I've always kind of seen, if someone doesn't write their own lyrics, um, you know, all right, sure, I could still enjoy it, but I'm not looking at them the same way. This is beyond that, right? Because ghostwriting has been in hip hop for
Sure.
a long time. Like there's a lot of artists who have had ghostwriters, but now when you insert AI into it opens up a whole other can of worms. So now, what
I
what are
think
your
so.
thoughts?
Well, I'll say on that note, like I think for me, I see that as two different conversations. I understand why they get talked about in the same space though. So for me, the idea of what an artist is supposed to be is I think different than the conversation of what the ethics are, let's say, behind using AI in art.
Right,
So, and I know you're more well versed on like the music and especially the hip hop side of it. But what I will say is when it comes to artists, I feel like people have always been selling their brand. Like since artists existed, since you could hear a person on the radio, there was a brand that they were selling, right? There was like a brand that Marilyn Monroe was selling. There was a brand that any artist, whether you were on screen, on radio, whether you were music, whether you were a painter, like there was something about you that people were buying into when they bought your music, when they bought your art, or when they saw your show. And so I think that when it comes to ghostwriters, I understand why that had become so taboo. But when we think about the engine that exists behind one artist today, I mean, we're talking about a team of people.
right,
Yes, that person may very well be talented. That person may very well be a hard worker. They may be a visionary. They may be an entrepreneur. They may be all those things, but they don't exist in a vacuum. And so I think people can get very nitpicky with what kind of help and assistance that their artists, the artists that they like, are allowed to participate in. They're allowed to have to support their art. And where that comes into play with AI is that AI should become another tool that any artist would use, right? Maybe I think I'll stop there. I would say I think it becomes a tool that artists use, and it becomes yet another way for people to. I think they see the AI coming into play and they're like, okay, well, you're not the artist that I imagine you to be, because I imagine that you are this creative person, this visionary, this person who, when you write those lyrics, you're representing yourself, right? And we see that in comedy, right? When a person is on stage and they're telling a joke, people take their jokes very literally, or they take their jokes to be a representation of who they are as a person. And I think sometimes people forget that when you're an artist, you're putting out a product. And so I think that's part of the conversation, where AI is now stripping that artist of the identity that people were buying into in the first place. And then that becomes like this sort of betrayal to the consumer, to the listener, to the viewer.
Right. No, but I do like what you said about the artist's you use a different word, but like the artist's identity and image and portrayal.
The brand, right?
The brand.
Their
right?
personal brand.
And so for example, let's say one of the biggest artists in history, talking about one Michael Jackson. For those of you who may not know, like I think Michael is credited as a writer on a number of his own songs, but he had writers, right? I think for people that know, it's not a secret. One of his most collaborated writers is Rod Temperton. I believe he was in another R&B group called Heat Wave or something. I might be wrong, but Rod Temperton he's a great songwriter. He didn't only write for Michael Jackson; he wrote for other artists. But I think so. The other way that this kind of ties in is, Rod Temperton was able to have a career. He was able to like feed his family on his writing and getting residuals and stuff from the music, from his writing credits. And so fast forward, right? There are writers now, record labels may have their in-house writers. Obviously hip hop is different in a way, and I'll touch on that. For different genres, R&B and pop and stuff, they have their writers that they present the songs to certain artists, and they may accept it. They do the song. There's stories about songs that were written for certain artists that they rejected, that goes to other artists as well. But they get paid off of that. With AI, it may be a way to kind of skirt around the writers getting paid. Record labels, a lot of people don't have trust in record labels and feeling like they're going to do whatever it takes to kind of avoid paying, like make the most money they can, avoid paying, right? So you have, artists making money, and where platforms like the streaming platforms, they're making less and less now these days. But now the writers maybe not getting as much writing work if AI becomes a more popular thing.